CG again?
What? It's.
The CG, just so you can put the images up on the.
There you go. Hey, folks, welcome back to the
Alright,
Trailer Park
there
Show.
you
How you
go.
guys doing? We are back with another week and another fine edition, and welcome back, Avito. We hope
Thank
everything
you,
went
thank
okay.
you.
We had to tease you last week because you were gone, so.
Right.
I don't know if
Figured probably some kind of immigration problem or something, you know.
you
Couldn't
probably
get
had to go back to
across
Mexico,
or-
go take care of the stuff again, you know, all that stuff is, but you know, we welcome you back.
Well,
you know.
thank God to you Republicans, I had an ID.
Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Awesome.
That helped.
Well, we're back with the usual crew. We got James Slowpokey Ritter. We have
We're
Davina
missing
Fernandez.
two of them, but they'll be one of them will be back next week. Cargill won't be back for probably till after December 8th, which we'll have Antonio Bueller on.
Next. Good.
Okay.
But of course, we have Alexis here. And if you
Exciting,
can, Pokey, we'll go ahead
Alexis.
and we'll let you go ahead and
I
do the
used to
introduction.
work for Team Alexis. I've been really depressed about, you know,
Old age.
when I was a kid, I was in the Navy, and now that my ship's in Brownsville in the cutting torch, and I used to work all those elections with Team Alexa, because we've always said down here, haven't we, you do more than vote. You can get out, and there's so much to do, and being involved in the elections is really important stuff. That's why I'm glad we got Alexis down here. And I was on Team Alexa for probably over 10 years, huh?
10 years.
It was the receiving substation, the southeast, I guess, Travis High School. And so I thought with this election coming up, and we didn't have, how was our turnout this time?
We had a 40% turnout.
Pretty good for
It was awesome. Travis County historically has one of the higher turnouts, if not the highest in the state. And
that
we've
right?
gotten several awards from the Texas Secretary of State for having the highest voter turnout, percentage-wise, in the state.
Oh, very nice. Well, if possible, let's do some quick formal introductions real quick.
yeah,
Alexis,
let's
if you
hear
can,
from her, hear where she comes from. But anyway, I was just going to finish that. That is, what?
No, go for it.
Oh, that is part of, we'll go into some of the history of it, because I'll have to tell you about all the exciting adventures we used to have in Central County in the old days, because that's where I got the inspiration to get, I mean, you can always go out and help candidates or a party, but to help actually election is to really help accomplish things. And it gives you another insight into the inner workings of just how all this stuff goes on. Spend a few cycles working the election. It's always good to have at least poll judges, alternative. You're a judge or alternative?
Whatever they.
You were just a clerk this last time, huh?
I'm whatever they assign me to.
Sent for.
So, but I've been there, done that, all of them.
But it is good, right? To
Oh yes,
see how
yes,
things work.
Yes, and LULAC, LULAC on not only locally but nationally advocates to all our members to get engaged in the political process through working.
Both parties do, I know.
Right. Because
know,
many
sure.
times, especially in low turnout areas,
Yes, sir.
many people will go vote if they see someone they know working the polls. They feel comfortable. They say, "Oh, okay, I'll go."
Well, that'll go
so
back
and so
to.
is there.
That'll
or
go
so-and-so
back
are
to.
there.
I always liked traditional voting day
And
without because it was
I
a
mean,
community thing, y'all.
in 439, one of the most
Precinct
consistent voters are senior citizens.
Sure.
And they have a hot rod like yours, and they'll start at 8 in the morning and be there by 10. But hey, they trot and they walk.
Gee, thanks.
Well, and the law allows for children under the age of 18 to accompany their parents into a polling location and even go into the booth and push the buttons if the parent allows, so that we can show future voters what the process looks like.
Let's go ahead and start with Alexis. Tell us who you are and stuff like that. Bio, whatever you call it.
Well, good evening, all of you out there in Trailer Park Land. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Alexa Buxkemper. I'm the training manager for the Travis County Elections Division, which is headed by the county clerk, Dana DeBevois. And I essentially oversee the poll worker training for our county. We teach workers how to use the machines, how to comply with the law. I'm responsible for writing the technical manuals that show them how to do this. And I've been there about 10 years as a permanent employee now, and I was a temp for a couple of years before that. I got my start in the polling world because my father was an election judge in our precinct, which is 421 over there in the Travis Heights area. And once I turned 18, he roped me into doing this with him. And I worked as a clerk in precinct 421 from 1983 to 2003 when I joined the elections team, because I started working for the elections as a temp employee inside the office in late 2003. So that's kind of how I got my start. My father always showed me how important it was. My mother was a poll worker as well. And so they would get up at those early hours, go and pick up the ballot boxes and the supplies, take care of all of those things. And they just showed me how important it was to get involved with your community, especially running the election. Because, you know, in order to put forth democracy, we have to have free and fair elections.
Which
Amen.
means getting involved.
And
I would, let me,
I know we can't say salary or what.
now, hold on, first,
But-
this isn't Alexa's first appearance here, actually, because remember, way back then, I brought the camera down to our receiving station. I couldn't film at the time, but she did walk me through every step and show us. I have no idea what that old film is. That was on one of the old cameras.
That was a very interesting night. We showed up to the
Yeah, that broken leg or
Travis
something.
High School receiving substation, and we're normally in the cafeteria, and suddenly the custodian says, "Oh, no, we have a dance tonight." And I was like, "What do you mean? We're supposed to have 50, 60 workers showing up, and then election officials with all this equipment and paperwork, and where are we going to go?" So they stuck us in the library, which
Yeah,
is a very
That's
small
right. Yeah, it was very small.
accommodations, and I was actually in a wheelchair and on crutches at the time because I had tripped and broken my foot, not playing roller derby. I know how to fall down on roller skates. Anyway, so he filmed me standing there on my crutches as we took everyone through the different stations at the
Different stages,
receiving
different jobs,
substation.
different things you have to do. We pulled it off. There were several times when Team Alexa pulled off some tough stuff. We had to go across the street 2 years.
We did.
That was another tight
the
little
Travis High
place.
School wasn't available for the intake station. I guess that was in the primary of 2012. And we
Was it?
had to go across the street to the Faith Presbyterian Church. And they offered me a choice of Aikens High School or Faith Presbyterian.
We went
But I
across the
chose
street.
Faith Church because I grew up going to that church. And because it was immediately across the street, I thought if anyone went to the wrong place, they'd at least be right across the street instead of 7 miles away. So that's why we chose that. But that was a little crowded too.
I like to talk about the old time, not just the Central County, but we've had our fun there before. What was that one time? Some lady dropped all her stuff at the curb and drove off.
I wonder who that was.
I don't know what was that.
Anyway,
It wasn't my lady.
luckily we have runners who, you know, help our election workers from the curb when they pull up in their cars after such a long day of working, and we help them get all their stuff inside. This last election, it was a little bit of rain and it was kind of cold, so it was a little harder, but
There was always something. You know, everyone, there was always at least one little niche of some kind. I guess that's just the way it is. You're always going to have some kind of little screw up or whatever you call it.
We
Well,
Some of these old people would come in and they've been, like you say, up since 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning.
well, let me just say that when someone's willing to serve, we want to do everything we can to support that person. And
Yeah.
that's why we have those runners that help them in from the car. We have a wonderful call center too, that when workers are out there on election day and they're kind of new, they can call in at any time and ask, "Hey, you know, I need some information about this," and we can tell them where it is in the manual, the steps to follow the procedure. We have technical troubleshooters that rove around in vans and visit the sites to take care of giving any extra supplies that are needed. My staff of trainers goes out in the morning and run around and make sure that the polls open properly. Our tech staff goes around and helps them close properly. So we have a lot of support that we give to our workers.
Well, excellent.
Go ahead.
That's it. We can say compensate.
Compensate.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yes.
Okay, but we can't say
We're not going down
salary.
to
We
this.
can't, we
Correct,
can't
whatever.
compensate, but we can't say the amount.
the amount.
Okay, great.
And I think that one of the biggest, for those persons that are not involved in the election, working as election clerks or judge, because one of the most common comments that we get while we work, "Oh, thank you for volunteering."
You ain't volunteering,
Thank you
are
for
you?
volunteering, you know.
I actually used to
but-
volunteer sometimes. It would write down on my sheet, "Do not pay volunteer."
But,
Not too often, but every now and then. Back when I was, dump trucking.
so y'all always hire, or you have a hiring period sometimes where you are,
We do. For this election, since our number of sites are scaling back a little bit because the sheer size of the election is not quite as large, we're really only hiring for election day workers and for our receiving substation staff. So those are the two main positions that we'll be hiring for this election. It's not that we're greatly reducing the number of sites for people to vote, but because it is no longer a county-wide election, some of those areas are not even participating. So, because the runoff is only in the City of Austin, the AISD, and the ACC territory.
Yeah, I forgot there's also the ASD runoff.
Don't forget me, Dan. Because, like you said, there are going to be less voting places and less
You want to participate
opportunities
for the
to
runoff?
vote. Huh?
So you're volunteering. So you're volunteering for the runoff.
Yeah, for the early vote and election day.
Well, let's talk about what it requires to work on election
you go.
day. So we hire judges and alternate judges. The judge is the one, the presiding judge, who's vested with the authority ultimately of running the polling place. However, the alternate judge is kind of like the first runner-up in Miss America. If the judge cannot fulfill his or her duties, the alternate judge will step in instead of the judge. But they really work together as a team. And then they have a support staff called clerks. And the Texas Election Code says that the judge shall hire the clerks. So there is going to be a staff of 4 people in each polling place for this election. And basically, once we hire the judges and alternate judges, they will hire their support staff, which are clerks. And both of these jobs pay. The judge and alternate judge job is paid just a tad more than the clerks, but they both pay. Requirements, you must be a registered voter of Travis County to be a judge or an alternate. And in order to be a clerk, you also must be a registered voter of Travis County. However, there's a special new student poll worker program that the legislature approved a couple sessions ago. And students who are 16 but not yet 18 may serve under that special program with a parent's permission and the signature of a principal or homeschool supervisor. And there can be up to 4 per precinct because we have vote centers here in Travis County. 2 can serve in the counties where we have precinct polling places, and 4 can serve in the counties that have vote centers.
And they're compensated for.
They are also compensated. That's why they must be 16.
And that's actually working in the poll.
Yes, it is.
Not like when my sons came down, they do some of the running stuff, but
But I
Okay,
think that's good to know so
Yeah.
that, those that are civic or, government teachers in high schools, they can share this with their, with their students and the families, that this is an opportunity for them to also have it be part of their
and they're paid too.
their education
are paid.
portfolio, worked at the county at an election as part of their civic obligation.
It's a very long day, I must say, for all the workers. We require them to get into the polls at 6 a.m. and have the polls open and running by 7. And typically by the time that they close polls and complete their paperwork, it'll be around 8 o'clock. That's when they will leave and come to the receiving substation, which is also where we need staff.
No, she just wants to give her 2 cents.
It can't be as much fun at the receiving station as when I was there and we would race to see who would be there first. We always racing there. Gotta be first, gotta be first, gotta beat all those other people.
Didn't want to get in line or
Didn't
what?
want to get in line. We always had to be first. Well, we were first after the Travis High School people, but they didn't count because they were already there on site. But we were in the race. So my team
You
was
did
about
it for quite a
supporting
few
team.
cycles yourself.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. I had my own little team that went wherever I went.
All right.
She had to drag me down. Yes, you have to go down and pick up all your supplies, and then at the end of the night, you still had to go drop them off.
That's right.
Can we talk about provisional vote? Because a lot of people don't understand what it is and also don't understand they can vote provisional.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So the provisional voting process is a way that allows a voter who may not be registered or who otherwise has some unresolvable issue at that time, including lack of a proper ID, to cast a ballot at that time.
Not the no ID thing, huh?
And then we will hold that ballot to the side until it can be resolved by the voter registrar doing research. And then the early voting ballot board, which is like a jury of peers made up of both parties and independents and whatnot. And they all meet and they look at the recommendations of the voter registrar. They review the circumstances, and then they will make a ruling as to whether that ballot can be accepted or rejected. But people can no longer be turned away at the polls and told that they cannot vote. So this is a way for them to vote and then have their issue resolved.
Can we back up just a little?
Sure.
Now who looks at these the voter registrar, and who else?
And the early voting ballot board. This is a group
What's
of
this consist
ordinary
of?
registered voters who are willing to serve, which we also
More volunteers, or?
They're also paid, and we need people from both parties and also independents, and they
You
can
know, that's where I
serve
was going.
on this board, and they examine the reasons for the provisional votes, and then they can make a ruling. And also, one of the new reasons for the provisional would be lack of the proper ID at the time of voting, in which case now the voter has an opportunity to cure the lack of an ID by coming in person to the voter registrar's office anytime after the ballot is cast on regular business days during normal business hours, and present an approved form of ID after the fact. They can go renew an expired ID. They can, you know, if they left their ID at home, they can retrieve it and then come, and they have up to 6 days after Election Day to cure the provisional vote for lack of an ID.
Nice.
Answer your questions?
No, but
You were waiting for
on
something
the
bad.
board, is that appointed or they hired, or how is the board composed of?
If anyone would like to serve, they're welcome to call our office and say, I would like to offer my services to the early voting ballot board.
Both, or do you,
Both parties
do you
give
call
us
both
lists.
parties? They're
Yes,
all
we
aware
do.
of it, I guess, yeah.
They offer lists of workers. Since this runoff is on December 16th, it's a little hard sometimes to procure folks around the holidays.
Yeah.
So out there in Trailer Park Land, if you would like to serve on the ballot board, give our office a call.
Should have one or two out there
512
willing to.
854 4996.
We don't have our CG machine which puts stuff up on the screen. Oh, you got the data on there?
There's some other stuff that they're working on, so
Oh,
it's
All
been,
right.
it's being worked on that part. So
Once again, I'll say it, 854 4996.
I know another very unique but realistic vote that people should also know that can happen is curb voting, curbside.
Oh, curbside voting.
Can you explain that?
Yes, that's a wonderful mechanism for taking the e-slate, which is the name of our electronic voting template, to a voter at curbside. And if it isn't possible for a voter to enter the polling place, because the most common is somebody had a knee replacement, or they just can't get in the polling place because maybe it's too strenuous, we can take the ballot to the curbside. And so a lot of times if the person is going to drive him or herself, we just ask that you call ahead and let our office know which polling location you're going to and approximately when you'll be there, and our staff will keep an eye out. But most people bring an assistant, and that assistant can go in, check in the voter, and then we will take the sign-in form and the electronic e-slate template out to the curbside so they can vote in the car.
even if there's a big line already to vote, you can.
Well, typically the assistant will have to wait in the line. However, you know, it's important that when our poll workers identify someone who may not be able to wait in a long line, they're welcome to offer expedited voting to, you know, somebody with a disability, somebody who's pregnant maybe can't stand in that line, somebody who's elderly and having difficulty standing. They're welcome to walk up and down that line and you know, offer that to someone who may not be able to wait in a long line.
oh, very cool.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
They got it up
it's,
for
For
All
some
right.
reason, I got the terminology confused, and I called it drive-through voting.
Curbside
You
with
get,
drive-thru.
get your fried chicken with your vote, right?
You missed the fried chicken we had, but that's all
But I
right.
smelled it when I walked in.
Yes,
Yeah, I bet.
I didn't know where to go, and so I just followed the fried chicken smell. So,
It was good stuff this time. I did want to, I don't know if you can ask these questions about, will it take, vote centers, and with early voting in East Slate, is there even a need for substation anymore?
okay, well, that's a great question. So when we have vote centers, what that means is voters can vote anywhere, just like it's early voting, but they can now vote anywhere on Election Day. And we are one of the counties that is participating in the vote center program as authorized by the legislature a few sessions ago. We intend that all of our elections going forward will be vote center elections. And maybe you woke up and had to go to work before 7 o'clock, and maybe you're not anywhere near your registered precinct. Well, now it doesn't matter. You can go to any of our, it'll be 133 locations on Election Day for this runoff. And there were, I believe it was 196 or 185, something like that, for this past November election. And you can go there and vote there.
In any of the early voting locations, I
Mm-hmm.
voted over at Carver or whatever it was with,
Yes, and it's always been like that in early voting, but now it's also like that on Election Day.
so,
So is that to allow for the ease of, so that people have an opportunity to make sure that they vote, or it was just, or how?
you can vote anywhere.
Yes, part of it was, if you'll remember back when we had precinct voting, if you weren't at your registered precinct and it was already 6:45 till 7, if you didn't have time to travel there, even if you cast the provisional vote in the precinct where you were, it might ultimately be rejected because the ballot for you wasn't available at that place. Because when we had the precinct
Yeah.
locations, they only had the specific ballot for that area. But
Yeah,
now that
it
we have
might-
vote
you
centers,
might not be able to
all
vote there.
ballots are available at all of our locations. And so no matter where you live and what your unique combination of races is, any of our vote centers can call up and you can get your individual ballot there.
There's some good info on the screen right there.
And we'll talk about actually the website in just a little bit.
Yeah.
I still wanted to, at first I was against all this new technology because, I really like the old ballots in Central County, but are we just gonna do away with all that, like substation? I know, like you said, Central County's not near as exciting as it used to be.
Well, now that we're over on 5501 Airport, we don't really have as large of a place to take in all the precincts that would be showing up there at once. So we have our satellite receiving substations. We have Anderson High School, Dobie
We've
Middle
always had
School.
those, haven't we?
We have, and we used to have actually a fifth
Far as
one,
I
but now
remember.
we're down to 4. And then we also have Covington Middle School and Travis High School. And each of our precincts is assigned to one of those stations based on the geographic location of their polling place. And so we only have about 50-some precincts descending on each one of these stations. And really, it does take a while to process them. Because what they'll do is they'll bring back everything except the booths, or the E-slate booths, which are on their legs. They'll bring back all the other equipment. We'll help them into the building, and then they'll check in, and we'll process their electronic ballot box. And then we'll take back the computer and the printer and the keyboard and all their supplies. And we'll look at their envelopes and examine their paperwork and make sure all the timesheets for the workers are there and any other legally required paperwork. And then they'll drop off their phones and their other supplies, and then we'll do a mini audit of their paperwork. And so all that takes a little bit of time, and I just don't foresee us getting rid of
Not
the
gonna have
satellite
to.
intake stations.
I was thinking about, there's no longer these big piles of paper ballots anymore. There's just little bitty,
And
they go in an envelope.
E-slates are not touch.
We are a touch button system. It's not a touch screen system. So the voter navigates the ballot by dialing a wheel, which moves the
Yeah.
highlighter bar through the ballot. And then when the highlighter is resting on his or her choice, whether it's a candidate or a yes or a no, then they will push the enter button. But it is not a touch screen. It is a touch button system.
We'll make sure that easier for any calibration issues. So.
Right.
Like the ones, that copy.
And you cannot take your phone into the booth and scroll, and
But you
Current
can't
law.
take paperwork, right?
you can
Current
take
law
paperwork.
prohibits the use of wireless devices within 100 feet of a voting station. And basically, the only people allowed to use their devices are poll workers in the official conduct of their duties. Because earlier I mentioned we have a call center.
Yeah.
Well, when workers are calling the call center about checking on voter eligibility and anything that has to do with the conduct of the election, they may use their wireless devices. We provide them with a county-issued cell phone. Voters can also use their cell phones if the worker says, hey, call this call center, and then we help them oftentimes if they are eligible for one other process called limited ballot during early voting. Also, workers who are employed within the building hosting us can use their wireless devices. Like if we're in a school, the principal can talk on his phone when it's
Janitor
official
and all that.
business, things like that. So,
So
but
you don't-
voters, if they have their choices on their phone or their tablet, we ask them to mark it on paper because that is currently not a permitted use. But any voter, if they've marked it on a paper, they can bring any paper, including candidate papers, as long as they're not visible to other voters and they whip them out in the booth, that's fine.
So you
What
don't
about
see it going away.
the Women League of Voters guide?
The League of Women Voters Guide is a really good resource. They ask candidates questions. Candidates can give personal information and what they, espouse as their platform. You can bring the League of Women Voters Guide inside the polls.
Inside the booth.
Inside the
to
booth.
vote.
It can actually be visible because that's not actually candidate materials. But yes, they can mark it in advance. Also, when Chris put up that votetravis.com link a few minutes ago, that's a really great tool because you can log on to votetravis.com and print your own individual sample ballot. And you can mark that and take it in the booth, and that has your unique combination of races. It'll be up and running again after we test the ballot this week and we get all the new ballot styles programmed in there. But voters can log on and print that sample ballot and take it in the booth with them.
The reason I asked that question is because I remember a voting experience where colleagues were debating whether that was the Women League of Voters was something you could take into the poll. Poor voter, they had him. Yes, you can. No, you can. Yes, you can. Okay, let's get over here and find. You know.
The prohibited thing is that we are no longer allowed to give it out at the polls. So voters can bring it with them, but it cannot be distributed by election workers in the polls.
Okay.
That's the prohibition.
So let's talk a little bit about the.
distribute.
No,
I'd like
but
to
that's good
touch
to
base
know.
with
Yeah.
some of the training process that you're doing
Okay.
with candidates or people that may be working on I guess on an election there during the early campaign. Because I'm looking at the website right now, the votetravis.com,
Oh, uh-huh.
but I want to talk a little bit about about what you're doing when it comes to training.
Okay.
So how does that work out? So you mentioned that they select people that are going to be coming in. I guess the judge selects people that are going to be helping out at the precinct. What type of training do they go through?
So in every election, we have for judges and alternate judges, a sit-down 3-hour session for experienced folks and a 4-hour session for novices in case it's someone's first time. And I get up and I lecture for about a half an hour. I talk about to our experienced workers things that have changed since the last election, things that are very important and germane to this election only, because each election has its own specifics that are important to it. And then they break out into hands-on groups, and we have temporary workers who facilitate the small hands-on groups. And they'll break out into a group of about 3 to 5 people, and we will take them through a curriculum that shows them how to open the polls and set up the equipment, how to complete the paperwork, how to process voters and deal with all the different situations. What if someone's moved? What if someone needs a provisional vote? What if someone, has moved out of the county, something like that. And
Change of address or?
change of address. We teach them how to deal with all of those different scenarios, and then we close the polls, complete the closing polls paperwork, show them how to lock and seal the booths and the equipment for security, and then their session is completed in those 3 hours or 4 hours if they were a beginner. As far as our support staff for clerks, we train all of our clerks online. We have an online training module, and people can, who have been hired can log on and take the training online.
And would they be able to do that at home, or does it have to be at?
Oh, no, they can do it
designated
at home. And they can do it 24 hours a day at their leisure, in their robe and slippers if they like.
Drinking your beer
I
Yeah.
don't know about that, but
at home.
I like it already.
Now, there was an interesting thing that you mentioned about students, like 16, that are over 16 and under 18,
yes.
that can work during this time. How does that affect them with school?
Well, this is one of those situations that the Texas Education Code describes as an excusable absence. And so as long as their principal or homeschool supervisor and the parents give permission for the absence, they consider this a civic duty or indoctrination
Civic
into
lesson, I
the
guess.
democratic
Or
process.
the government
Nice.
class or something.
Yes, and it's very exciting because students tend to be tech savvy, and they make really great poll workers.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I can believe that part.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's pretty nice.
But-
I'm gonna have to remember that for next year.
There seem to always have been some kind of changes, it seemed, every cycle. You'd mentioned that you have to point out some of these changes. Is this, guess I'm too amazed at the technology. It's going to eventually lead us to where there will be more
Well,
substations. They're not going nowhere. Do you see in the future that it's going to go even beyond where we're at now?
It's
Vote
always
from home, maybe. I
it's
don't
always interesting, where we're going with the future, and I don't know if you heard
know. No, like a forecast.
that Travis County is developing and working on its own voting system. We were featured in an article in, I believe it was Discover magazine, but stay tuned for more information about that, because we've been working with some folks for a couple of years to try to develop what we call Star Vote.
Wow.
You
So,
can't-
well, I know that.
Hold on, you can't dwell into any of this too much, huh?
so
It's
I'm
neat to
going to
know.
leave
I never heard
that
of this.
for
It's neat-
Dana
it's
to
neat.
put forth.
She's been on
However,
before.
However, it's a very exciting new process because part of the tenets of this is we wanted to use off-the-shelf hardware and things like that. So, things that were not proprietary in nature to vendors. So
When will,
again, I leave that to Dana to expound further.
when do you, well, one question, during non-election years or cycles when you have more than one, what does the office do?
Oh, what do we do in off-season?
Right, right.
Okay, that's a great question. Well,
What do we do?
we do a lot of evaluating of our processes, what happened, what can we improve upon. My department intakes all the election workers' surveys, and we type up all the comments that our workers give, and we disseminate those to the different managers around our office so that they know what workers are feeding back to us. We like when we were first doing the online training development, that took several months when we were in the off season. We received a Pew grant back in 2008, and we participated in a study to see if in-person training plus online training made a more educated poll worker. So there's always exciting things that we're doing on the off season. Although I tell you, the off seasons are getting shorter and shorter. So.
Well, because of all the, last year because of all the changes, we had so many elections, and then the runoff, and then this year because everything was moved from May to mostly to November.
Yes.
So next year we'll be having which elections?
We will have a May election. It's that second Saturday in May. I'm sure we'll have some
2015.
entities that join on that ballot, although ACC and AISD have mostly jumped to November. So,
That makes sense.
but that is the municipal election date. We have a couple of uniform dates. We have a primary date, a May or municipal election date, and then a November election date. And so
Because the governor's is not next year, but the following year, right?
2016, yeah.
2016 is our next major general election.
Okay.
It should be the city council and all that, or half the city council.
I wanted to jump back, if I could, to the
Please do.
receiving substation workers that we need so desperately. Those hours of service, we ask people to show up at 6 o'clock, and we're usually wrapped up and out of there by 10 or 10:30. And again, it did pay, even though we can't say how much. It's a nice dinner out, we'll put it that way, with about 4 hours of service.
Yeah.
So,
That's why I did it mostly, because at the time working, and you could get off work and then go and still be participating
and 16-year-olds can serve at the receiving substations as well.
after
But
school.
they can't handle the ballot materials.
They
because
push
they're
it back
not-
and forth between
Because
the
they're
car.
not registered voters, so normally we use them as runners to help the people in from the curb.
Carry all their stuff in.
So back in the day, Florida, when they were having all these
Hanging
contests,
chad and all that.
Here, it's a totally different electronic voting. So what is it that the board looks at in reference to something? I mean, that just wouldn't exist in this kind of elections, right?
I've never served on the board, but I've been there when they were doing their examinations of things. And basically what they're looking for is the worker checks a particular reason for the provisional vote. They examine the reason. One of the reasons for provisional is to cancel your ballot by mail, because maybe you applied for a ballot by mail, but then you don't know where it is, or you've just changed your mind and decided to vote in person. The provisional vote allows you to vote in person if you didn't have the ballot. Now, if you have it, you just give it up and then you get a regular vote. But if you, for some reason, say, I didn't apply for a ballot by mail, or I don't know where my ballot by mail is, you can vote that provisional ballot, and then as long as you didn't send it back by mail, and all other terms and conditions set forth by law are met, they will accept that ballot. This is the things they examine.
Okay, so in that case, do they also have to do the cure?
A voter who is voting provisionally to cancel a ballot by mail does not have to
Okay.
cure. The cure is only for lack of an ID at the time of voting.
Okay.
That is the only thing that can be cured.
Okay.
So if you do vote provisional and it needs to be cured, then you do need to go to the
To the voter
in the-
registrar's office.
Because if you don't, and it is good, but because you didn't go cure it, it invalidates it, right?
Right. They have up to 6 days after Election Day to appear in person at the voter registrar's office with the approved form of ID. And what's really exciting, if I could just go over the IDs.
Yeah.
It's Texas driver's license, personal identification card from Texas, election identification certificate, which was the new ID created by the law, Texas concealed handgun license, military
Yeah.
ID, from all the branches of service. U.S. citizenship certificate or certificate of naturalization with a photograph, U.S. passport, both the book and the card are both good. So those are the 7 forms of acceptable photo ID for voting. The temporary version of those IDs from the DPS is considered valid for voting because when you get it at the DPS, it has a photo. When you print it at home, it's my understanding it doesn't have a photo when you print it at
You're
home.
talking about the paper.
The
one.
paper
Okay.
temporary,
Right.
that is considered valid for voting.
I wonder if my
But
VA
with that
healthcare card would
photo,
work.
right?
It has to have a
have a photo.
photo if it's the temporary.
And it's important to stress on here that the ones that are issued by the state are all issued by DPS.
And
So-
there's no temporary concealed handgun license, but you will get a temporary of the driver's license, personal identification card, or election identification certificate from the DPS.
Okay, I also heard that if you're going out for the ID to vote, the ID card,
The
what do you
election
call it?
card, the
Election
election
ID.
ID certification.
But if, for example, if you have an ID or a driver's license, that when you go apply for that, you have to surrender whatever.
Yes, you can't.
Is
You
that
have to
true?
swear you don't have any of the other 7 forms to even, or other 6 forms to get the election identification certificate. So, like an out-of-state student is eligible for the EIC.
Or if you had another name, or
So,
Well, I think Davina was pointing out about I guess about the state IDs. And I'm assuming you're talking about the Texas state.
No,
IDs
well, I
or-
just saw
or-
that, what is it that y'all had up there
Can you put
about
it back
the
up, Mo?
ID?
well,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
have the keepcalmvoteon.com
one.
Yeah.
website
That
Correct.
one.
that has a lot of information about what you need to go vote.
Yeah,
And
and I'm actually looking at it right here.
Why the selection of those words?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Why the selection of those words? Keep combo.
Well, we
don't want your cousin to get all excited about this motor. Won't my green card work no more?
Well, we
What?
wanted something catchy, and as you well know, the Keep Calm movement is fairly catchy.
Yeah.
One particular thing that was out there was something like Got ID, and they had like a milk mustache. But anyway, so the
But
Keep
that's only
Calm
in
Vote
Travis
On
County.
was a website that we launched with the city of Austin back, I think it was a year ago, right before the November election of 2013, to really try to get out to the people, what do you need, how do you get it, and help them before it ever even got started.
I like
But
that.
see,
God, I was,
that's only in Travis County.
That's
It is?
correct.
The Keep Calm.
what do they call it in other counties?
No.
Oh.
The reason I'm saying it, I can say this. She can't.
Right.
But I can say this.
Go ahead.
The lingo, the reason is because Travis County is this very hard, strong Democrat, liberal
blue.
voter, so we
Blue
get
County.
upset because of the ID, so keep
Yeah.
calm.
I'm not
call
sure that
your
was the
cousins now.
thinking behind it, but
No, but that's the
we
way I
wanted
read
it to
it.
be catchy.
Yeah, yeah. So, but
It's
anyway.
catchy, especially
keep
for your
on,
cousins,
type
huh?
on.
Yeah, I mean, because
Calm down now. You can still
and
vote.
when we're working, we cannot discuss the issue of ID law. But
you mean,
every
when you have
time,
your LULAC hat on. Oh, no, when you're voting.
when we're working the elections, we
Except for
can't.
Pokey.
It's
Pokey
a
doesn't have
politically
something.
neutral
Yeah.
workplace.
Yeah.
And it's okay to tell voters what the ID law is, but it's not okay to get into a discussion about the
Right or
likes or the
wrong or-
dislikes or, things like that. Now, as a matter of fact, there were several court decisions that went down during this cycle, where when we started the cycle, there was a
Sure.
court decision that said, wait, stop, it's not in effect. And then, like, just a few days later, then there was a court decision that said, no, wait, we can't change horses in midstream, it's on. And then the Supreme Court also concurred with that. So we've been operating under the same voter ID that we have for the last year.
And we should say that the Keep Calm Vote On website comes in, besides English, it has 4 different languages. So you have Spanish, Hindi, Nepali, and
Vietnamese.
Gujarati. So you can translate it. You can actually have it translated into different languages for people that want to know the information. Does this get updated at any time? Because this looks like it looks like a basic website. But do people plan on adding more information to it as the cycles continue? Or
We would probably add information to it if anything were to change about the voter ID law, but it's mainly meant to put out there what do you need to vote, and not necessarily to expound further, which is what we do on our TravisCountyElections.org website, where we have information about how to join our team, what's on the ballot, historical returns. I mean, the TravisCountyElections.org website is just a wealth of information about all kinds of things related to elections.
Well, you know, you and I are very shy at speaking publicly, right? So
Yeah.
it's very challenging when we're working, and you have the voter,
And you can't talk, yeah.
and he's saying, well, I don't like this, you know, and I think it's stupid. Sir, please, thank you. Next.
I hear you.
It can be challenging when you're faced with somebody who's frustrated with the process. And, you know, we will always intake calls to our call center from any concerned voter who would like to call and express his or her opinion, or, you know, talk to us about the current state of affairs. And we will be happy to tell them what the law is, you know, how to help them comply. A lot of people don't realize that whenever they move, they're required to re-register at their new address immediately as soon as they move. And if they don't, then they could face a little bit longer paperwork at the polls. They have to fill out this paper called the Statement of Residence and let us know, where do you live now? If they leave the county, a voter who isn't registered and who actually moves out of the county is no longer eligible to vote in Travis County, because now they live in a new political subdivision. So I urge everyone out there, please update your information when you move. We did a very exciting, tax office did a campaign they called Move the Vote. And they had a lot of commercials on our Travis County channel about, hey, re-register as soon as you move. And I was in one of those commercials in my roller derby with my team, and we yelled out at the game, move the vote, and it was very exciting, and we had some people hitting each other on the track, and, you know, hey, move that vote. And then they had Roger Wade on one of them.
Oh, boy.
You know, we pulled up stakes and moved from the country, and you know, we registered at our new address right away. And then they had some hip hop guys, and then they had about 8 different versions of this commercial. It was so exciting and wonderful.
And Roger Wade is the press man for the sheriff.
Travis County.
Yes,
Sheriff.
he's the man with the hats.
Cool.
The man with the
Always
hat.
has beautiful hats.
Speaking of sheriff, we'll go into, we won't talk about security hasn't hacking into the thing, but I know in Philadelphia, they had some Black Panther Party people intimidating voters. Now, you have to stay back so far to do electioneering. But if there's somebody out there causing a ruckus, you have to call the sheriff, or?
Well,
guess so.
the Texas electioneering law allows people to campaign for or against issues outside the 100-foot marker. It is 100 feet from the entrance to the building where the polling place is located, is how the law is phrased. And so people can solicit, hand out information. They can ask people to sign petitions at that, as long as they're behind the marker. They are not allowed to use amplification devices unless they are 1,000 feet away. But they can, you know,
1,000 feet on
advocate
amplification,
for or against candidates or
no
issues.
bullhorns.
However, they're not supposed to be engaging in anything unlawful, like harassing people and stuff like that. But that they are allowed to influence folks there at that distance.
Understood.
10-4.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the votetravis.com.
Okay.
That's actually a pretty cool site. I gotta tell you.
It's very cool.
I'm our IT guy there, so it must be all right.
Well, here's the thing. You mentioned that you were that this is gonna go live.
Probably next week sometime, because right now where we are in the process is we are about to test the ballot. We're going to do that on Thursday, November 20th. And we must test every position on every precinct and every ballot style for every candidate and make sure that it tallies the way that we say it does. People are welcome to come and watch our public LNA. It's at 2 p.m. on Thursday. It's open to the public. They can come and watch us testing the ballot. But once we get all of the testing completed and all of the things that make each of these unique ballot styles for each precinct, then that information will be fed into this website so that you can log on and see your unique combination of races. We can't go live with that until the ballot's been tested.
Right.
So just in a few days, or maybe 7 days or so, it'll be live. And you go in and you either type in your last name and your birthday, or you type in your voter unique identification number. We call it the VOID. And you can see your individual sample ballot and your unique combination of races.
And and I'm going to guess that this can also help out if there's any problems with a name combination. As people were having some issues, I guess previously in some of the voting cycles where
You registered as
you
something,
registered
the middle
you registered
name.
as something, and then
You might leave the
change your
middle
last
name
name
out.
or whatever the case may
Right.
be. I'm assuming this will probably help out with that
It
some
allows the voter to view his or her name and how it's styled along with the registered address once it pops up on the screen. It shows you the 5 closest early voting locations to your registered address, and then the 5 closest election day, and then it also, in the form of little icons of people, shows the estimated wait time. And how we determine that is our poll workers are asked every 30 minutes to type in a little screen that pops up over their qualification screen how many voters are waiting in line. And then that feeds into this website so people will know, oh wow, the line's really long over here, maybe I should go over there.
So if a person has the VUID or the VUID number and the date of birth, they can kind of verify if that information matches, let's say, for example, the driver's license or other
Sure.
ID. If the person enters an ID or enters their name and it's off, I'm assuming it won't with the date of birth, it won't come up as.
Well,
assuming
it's
it's
either
gotta be
last
exact.
name and date of birth or VUID, I
Okay.
believe,
Yes.
on your screen. I'm
Yes,
just
it
going
is.
to peek. Yes.
And then or the date of birth as well.
Right.
So let's say, for example, with someone who has a unique last name as mine with 4 letters, and they accidentally type an extra letter with the date of birth, it's not going to show up.
You know, I have a very uncommon name, so I haven't tested it to see a more common name. I'm sorry
Oh
to
no,
say.
mine's not common.
Oh, okay.
Mine's unique. but we can,
Yours is pretty unique,
we can
too.
use Ritter.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, we use or even Fernandez, where they put down Fernandez.
He's politically correct. He's
And yes, we'll use the Hispanic one.
You need to have a
Or the Latino.
bilingual worker on the
But
table.
if they use Fernandez with the date of birth, and let's say, for example, he uses an S instead of a Z,
Oh,
would
uh-huh.
that?
I think
that
it gives you a
information?
list of the people who
With
fit
that-
the criteria.
Okay.
But most people, it'll only be one because that last name and that birthday is fairly unique.
Okay.
But if there is that difference, we have, there are forms. There are forms that they can fill out right to correct it.
Yes,
So
we
it'd be
have.
an opportunity to fix
Yeah,
it.
so let's talk about how this came about, because I know where you're driving. The other part of the voter ID law was the similar name requirements. And so what that part of the law said was that the voter's name must exactly match between the ID presented and the list of registered voters. So if there are differences, all the voter's required to do is execute an affidavit called the Affidavit of Similar Name. And it's just an initial column on our combo form, which is our sign-in form. And that's attesting essentially to, even though my name didn't exactly match, I am who I say I am, and I am that person. So it's really easy. And we also have the similar name correction request form where a voter can fill out this small form and sync up their voter registration name to match the ID they intend to present. Because, you know, we can't change the IDs. We can only change the voter registration. And so at the end of the election, we submit all those forms to the voter registrar, and the voter registrar makes those changes based on what the voter has requested.
So would that be a provisional ballot for that person?
Not at all.
Or that'd be an actual, okay.
It'll be a regular vote. They just have to execute that small affidavit with their initials. And even if only one name matches, we're still good.
Cool.
So, because, you know, this affects a lot of married women the most often, because what happens is the DPS, I believe, asks you to put your maiden name as your middle name and then your last name. So oftentimes the lady has a real lady's name as a middle name on the voter records, and then on her ID she has her maiden name as her middle name. That's how my mother's driver's license is. So,
Okay.
but this little small correction request form can sync up the voter's name on their official list of registered voters with the ID they intend to present.
Cool.
A lot of times they'll have the name of the bum they just threw out 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had some of those. Yeah, man, it was,
He's been going for 10 years,
Only
huh?
in East Austin, though. Only in East Austin.
no,
Nah,
you
I'm just
lived out
kidding.
in those springs. But I do want to say that your office does and makes every effort to ensure that the integrity of the vote is there and that accessibility to the vote and the voters is there. Because I know you put in a lot into it, your staff puts in a lot to make it real, I want to use the word easy, but more accessible, approachable, and friendly. So there really is no reason why we continue to have low voter turnout in a lot of our communities.
You've been really big on increasing turnout, and
Big.
I know we've all said to be
Come
more
and vote.
involved.
Come
yeah,
vote.
I mean,
Yeah.
hey, you know, it's not.
You can do more than vote. You can
Yeah.
actually work
you
there
can
That's
actually
right.
work.
We
and get
need
paid
you.
enough for a six-pack.
But, you know, because a lot of times you know, like some elections are just won by 2,000 or 3,000 votes.
Yeah, and
You
then
know?
you hear these people out there complaining about it all the time, and
Like I know in some district races, oh, I'm not gonna vote because so and so ended up in the runoff, and I don't. And the reason they ended up in the runoff is because they only mastered 2,000 votes each or something like that. But hey, you know, they had the opportunity, and now with from December 1st to the 12th, again, you have, my God, all those days to go vote.
well, we're all
opportunities to
voter
vote.
registrars here.
And that's
so-
what your people want to cut down, and I think that's wrong.
And just so we know, today is the
You had
voter
to throw that in
registration
there, huh?
deadline for the December 16th runoff. So today is the final day for somebody who was not previously registered to register. So
Well, that is a lot of days.
I know
Hold
we're
on a
already
minute.
past
November
hours for the runoff. This is the
Oh,
30-day.
where did I
So all of you out there in the virtual world watching us, Texas law requires that a voter be registered 30 days prior to election day and that his registration be effective by the date of the election. Now, that being said, you are certainly eligible to vote in the early voting period, even though your registration is not yet effective, although it will be effective on election day. So all those people who were going to be effective on November 4th, they were able to patronize the early voting period, even though it technically fell before the 4th, because their registration would be active by the 4th.
Right.
So,
It's also it's also National Unfriend Day on Facebook. Just so that you guys know.
But wait a minute.
Oh, really?
So when they come to the workers, and will it show that they're registered even though
Yes.
their date is not going to happen
Yes.
until afterwards? Oh, really?
yes, it's programmed to do that.
Oh.
Even if
Any
they're
early voting period that takes place before election day, the voter is eligible to
Eligible. That's
vote
it.
in that early voting period.
See, and again, another reason why you should be able to vote, you know, or should.
oh, I thought you were going to just say something about my
No.
party again.
No, well, that's what y'all want to take. They want to shorten
No,
early
but
vote days.
as a voter registrar, I didn't think of it that way. I figured
Also, all of you out there, come and sign up with our voter registrar here in Travis County.
well, she's great.
and take the course and learn how to register voters.
I can't remember
A
her name
training
now.
is required. Cheryl Reese.
Sherry, that's it.
Cheryl Reese is the volunteer deputy registrar coordinator for Travis County, and that is overseen by the tax assessor, Bruce Elfont. And basically, you will come and take about a 1-hour training, learn how to fill out the application and all of the duties that are required for
Even I
being
could do it.
a volunteer deputy registrar. I've been one since the year 2000. So
Yeah, I've been one for.
I'm Cesar Chavez eligible now. Just to let you know.
I think I started in 97, 98.
I tried to avoid it, but yeah, they got me into doing it back in
Yeah,
about
because
2000.
I know we were at the court from 90 to 94. And you started working in 80, you said?
I worked my first election in 1983
Oh, yeah, 5
because I
months.
turned 18 in 1982, in the very last part of 82. And so I worked, if you'll remember back a long time ago, they had many uniform dates, February,
Yeah.
March, May, September, November. And so there was constantly an election
Elections.
because at that time, the entity holding the election did the conducting of the election. It wasn't Travis
Right.
County always. You know, ACC ran its election, AISD ran its election. And so there were a lot more elections run by several other entities that, you know, were taking place all through the year. And the pay was only $3.50 an hour then.
Okay, so what's going to be on the ballot is the municipal elections, the runoffs. No
that's
state
coming up?
offices, right? Yeah.
No state offices, I don't think. No.
No.
No, all the general election is decided by a plurality of
Yeah.
votes, not a majority. But all the municipal are decided by 50% plus one vote.
Okay, we'll have municipal and AISD.
ACC, AISD, and the city of Austin.
And the city of Austin on the ballot come December 1st through the 12th, and then the election day is December the 16th.
And all of those people who live in a territory that is outside one of those political subdivisions will not be able to vote. So what's hard to explain sometimes to a voter is, yes, you are registered, you're an eligible voter, but you don't live within the confines of any of the political subdivisions on this ballot,
Right.
in this election. So, because some people, you know, they're disappointed when they find out they can't vote, but they don't live in one of those territories. So we'll face that this election,
Yeah, no runoff in my city council district.
or mine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
I live in Manor, so I'm okay.
We didn't get to go into the.
So voter, when you go to vote, remember, you cannot use your iPad or your iPhone to cast your vote or take in the booth
And take videos.
Unfortunately, there's
videos.
no, I'm a first-time voter, let's take my picture at the booth. I know that's
No,
sad,
no.
but
Yeah, I tried doing that with my daughter when she
That's
when she
why-
registered. So
that's why it's so important to go to votetravis.com and print out your individual sample ballot and mark it. Take it to the polls. That's what I did because it made things so much easier. Now, the ballot is far shorter in this runoff election than it was in November. There were 60-some races on people's ballots in November. There's only probably going to be 4 this time.
Yeah.
So 4 to 5 races.
It'd take most people 4 or 5 minutes. Of course, it took me
Or
about
less.
10.
true.
We didn't get to talk about the cost of these elections. It costs a lot of money to put these elections on.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if there's any way to reduce the cost of them. That's a lot of taxpayers' money is going to make sure we're all
Well,
voting.
and then you also have a saying, what is the price for democracy?
Well, it's easy when you ain't paying the taxes for it, I guess.
Is that
But,
something
you know-
that can be discussed?
Um,
Is the
Well, we ain't got enough time for that anyway. We only got, what, 3 minutes left?
2.5, yes.
2.5? We go off and it says 58:30.
I will tell you that Travis County really puts a very high esteem and thought to poll worker training. And historically, we do really well in comparison to, you know, a lot of other places out there because we do put emphasis on training and we do have all these wonderful support tools because we believe if somebody's willing to serve, we have to support that person in any way possible.
Right.
And that is why when we started, I mentioned the roving around vans with the technical troubleshooters. My trainers roving around they go around in their own cars in the morning to help sites get open. Our call center, you know, I took 95 calls at my desk during the election a couple weeks ago, just acting as a call center representative because we had a lot of calls. So, but we want to support everyone who's willing to serve, and we need people desperately to work our receiving substations. That's where we intake the election returns at night. And again, it's Anderson High School, Dobie Middle School. All you need to do is contact our office at the 512-854-4996 and express interest in working at one of our receiving substations or as an election day worker.
And they also have a need for bilingual workers.
Always, we always need
for
people.
bilingual workers.
Well, with a minute left, anything you want to say before you cut out here? We're really glad you came in. You've certainly had a lot of information. You didn't even have to look up notes or anything.
We need another show.
Well, I must tell
Yeah,
you
I
that
really like Cheryl. Cheryl was so good with this voter registrar training.
yeah,
And
I love Cheryl. She and I work very closely together, and
she's
I
really
take
good.
care of the elections training room, and she often has her training in there. But we always need people to serve.
Real quick, if I could. Now, I know Cheryl will come out to, if you have a church group or something, she'll come out there.
Yeah.
Can you do your elections training anywhere besides in the elections room?
Usually we only have it in the election room because of the volume of equipment that we have, because typically
okay.
we have, 36 to 50 people in a class, and we have 13 stations running where we have these little mock polling stations. Just take all that equipment
Oh, here we
somewhere
go.
else.
Anyway, bye-bye, folks. We'll be back next week. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.